History has a funny way of repeating itself. One of the most dangerous patterns is the link between economic collapse and war. When times get tough, countries become desperate. They look for someone to blame. They look for ways to reclaim their former glory. This can lead to aggression and conflict. It's a slippery slope from economic hardship to military action. But history isn't destiny. We can learn from the past. We can choose a different path. We can build a more just and peaceful world. But we must be vigilant. We must recognize the warning signs and take action to prevent history from repeating itself. Economic struggles have the power to ignite social unrest, topple governments, and pave the way for armed conflict. From the French Revolution to the rise of Nazi Germany, the link between economic hardship and conflict is undeniable. Some argue that Donald Trump's America First approach keeps us out of foreign entanglements. They point to his reluctance to engage in new military interventions. This argument is dangerously short-sighted. It ignores the economic realities of Trump's policies. His trade wars, tariffs, and isolationist approach harm the American economy. They also damage the global economy. This economic instability creates a breeding ground for conflict. Trump's protectionist trade policies have disrupted global supply chains and fueled tensions with key allies. The erosion of the rules-based international order increases the likelihood of miscalculation and conflict. Trade wars are not some abstract concept. They have real-world consequences. Tariffs raise prices for consumers. They make it harder for businesses to compete. This can lead to job losses and economic hardship. When economies weaken, countries become more likely to act out of desperation. The Trump administration's tariffs on goods from China and other countries ignited retaliatory measures, escalating trade tensions. American farmers, who rely heavily on exports, have been hit particularly hard by retaliatory tariffs. The economic pain inflicted by these trade wars is not limited to the United States. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the trade war between the United States and China is a threat to the global economy. When people feel economically insecure, they often look for someone to blame. This can lead to the rise of nationalism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism. Leaders who exploit these sentiments can gain power by promising to restore their country's former glory. They often point to external enemies and scapegoats to deflect blame from their own failings. This creates a dangerous dynamic where aggression and conflict become more likely. Economic hardship can create a fertile breeding ground for extremist ideologies. History is full of examples where economic collapse led to war. The most glaring example is Germany after World War I. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh economic penalties on Germany. This crippled the German economy and led to widespread resentment. This resentment created an opening for extremist groups like the Nazis to exploit. The Nazis promised to restore Germany to its former glory. They used this promise to justify their aggressive expansionist policies, ultimately leading to World War II. The economic devastation that followed World War I created a climate of despair and resentment in Germany. The Nazis capitalized on the widespread economic anxiety and nationalistic fervor. The lessons of history are clear. Economic collapse can have devastating consequences. Trump's economic policies are presented as a way to help working families. In reality, they often do the opposite. His tariffs raise prices on everyday goods. His tax cuts primarily benefit the wealthy and corporations. This leaves less money for essential services like education and healthcare. It creates an environment where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. This economic inequality breeds resentment and instability. The 2017 tax cuts did little to boost wages for working-class Americans. The rising costs of healthcare, housing, and education, coupled with stagnant wages, have made it increasingly difficult for working families to make ends meet. This economic precarity creates enormous stress and anxiety. When an economy crumbles, people instinctively search for someone to blame. This is where things get dangerous. Politicians and demagogues are all too eager to exploit this. They point fingers at minorities, immigrants, or foreign countries. They offer simplistic solutions that prey on people's fears and prejudices. This creates a climate of division and distrust. It makes it harder to address the underlying economic problems, and it makes conflict more likely. The rise of social media has exacerbated this problem, as it has made it easier for misinformation, propaganda, and hate speech to spread. Social media platforms are often used to create echo chambers, making people more susceptible to manipulation and exploitation. We are at a critical juncture in American history. The choices we make now will determine whether we continue down a path of economic instability and potential conflict, or whether we forge a new path toward a more just and peaceful future. We must resist the allure of simplistic solutions and divisive rhetoric. We must demand better from our leaders, holding them accountable for policies that promote economic justice, social cohesion, and global cooperation. This means investing in education, infrastructure, and social safety nets. We must also reject the politics of fear and division, choosing instead to build bridges of understanding and empathy. The future of our nation depends on our ability to make informed choices. The link between economic collapse and war is undeniable. History is littered with examples of nations torn apart by economic hardship. We are not immune to these forces. The economic policies pursued by the Trump administration have sown the seeds of division, instability, and potential conflict. But we are not destined to repeat the mistakes of the past. We have the power to break this vicious cycle, to choose a different path. This requires a fundamental shift in our thinking. We must demand more from our leaders, holding them accountable for policies that prioritize the common good. The challenges we face are daunting, but they are not insurmountable. Let us break the cycle of history and forge a new path toward a more just and peaceful world.